And with that, I now have the pleasure of introducing Colonel Joseph Zeis, the Senior Advisor for Aerospace and Defense within Ohio Governor Mike DeWine's cabinet. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine appointed retired Colonel Joseph E. Zeis Jr. to serve as Senior Advisor for Aerospace and Defense, a cabinet-level position he created to focus on Ohio's military and aerospace installations, such as the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and NASA Glenn Research Center. Zeis is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel with over 26 years of service. He graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1981, and he holds master's degrees in aeronautical engineering from the Air Force Institute of Technology and in national resource strategy from the Industrial College of the Armed Forces. He is a master navigator, a distinguished graduate of the U.S. Air Force over advanced technology contracts of major aircraft systems. In his last active duty position in the Air Force, he commanded the 46th Test Wing at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. Following his retirement from the Air Force, Zeis served as Executive Vice President and Chief Strategic Officer of the Dayton Development Coalition from 2007 to 2013. And in this role, he was responsible for identifying, facilitating, and implementing aerospace and technology-related opportunities to support business development and expansion in the Dayton region. He is also a graduate of the University of Dayton School of Law and has worked as an attorney with Sibley, Shalito, and Dyer in Dayton since 2016. So it is now my pleasure to introduce to the stage Colonel Joe Zeis.
Well, great. Well, what an amazing crowd, and what absolutely critical work you have done, continue to do, and honestly will do today, because it's really in convening in this symposium that you set the stage for the future of what to me is one of the most exciting areas of aviation, of aeronautics, and actually of defense that exists today. First and foremost, let me bring along Governor DeWine's greetings and appreciation for what you do today. The defense and aerospace ecosystem is critical to him, to the Lieutenant Governor Husted, and also to Ohio at large. So thank you for what you do. To those who have come from out of state, welcome to Ohio. We look forward to being partners with the rest of the country and the world in many respects as we move forward in such amazing aeronautical leaps. You know, when I consider urban air mobility, it's really very, very interesting to me as a former Air Force officer, somebody who's been in the aerospace defense world for now probably about 35 years. And when I look at the leaps and bounds of aerospace vehicles, it's astonishing to me. I purchased just a few years ago, actually, a small little drone from an office supply store, surprisingly enough. Took it home. Within about 5 minutes, I'm pretty competent flying it. Rock solid quadcopter in pitch, roll, yaw. Right? It's a little loose in the z-axis, right? Altitude, but okay. That's a flight control system that 10, 15 years ago I would have spent millions and millions of dollars as an Air Force acquisition officer. My degree was in flight controls, right? I would have spent millions of dollars, yet now I can buy that for $40. And you flip it on the underside, and guess what it's got for the same $40, right? It's got both a video and a still camera. It's incredible the technology advances that have been made in the aerospace world. And now we talk about taking it to the next step, scaling that up, scaling that flight control system up to something that's much larger, much greater impact in terms of mobility, in terms of autonomous travel, whether it's for boxes, whether it's for people. Those are amazing concepts They come with different constraints, different criteria, different regulatory issues and opportunities as an attorney, as an engineer, as someone in a government position now. Incredible opportunities. But that's really what you're defining today. And that's what's so exciting about this whole process. It's the vehicle design. It's the integration of those technologies. It's the certification, actually. Right? It's the certification. How do we lead turn? How do we lead turn law, regulation, and technology in a spiral manner such that it supports the industry, it supports the public, it supports their needs? Those are critical technologies, issues, and topics that you'll touch on today. And it's exciting because it's truly our next generation. It's our next generation, and it's envisioning the future. Then the other part is, of course, infrastructure, right? How do you plan for this as an environment, as an urban environment, as an airspace, as a national airspace system, as a state airspace system? Ohio is proud of it. We have airports in all 88 counties, right? Ohio has, from the very beginning, as George rightly points out, been the cutting edge and supporter of aviation, right, and of aerospace. So how do you do that? How do you integrate? Well, those are amazing topics to discuss. What is most interesting to me, and why we retired when I was in the Air Force. We retired. We were in Florida. I spent about a third of my career off and on, right, at Wright-Patterson. But we retired from Florida, from Eglin Air Force Base here, my last duty assignment. Made the decision to come back to Ohio for a couple of reasons. One is a great place to live, great place to raise our family, great educational opportunities as you're here right now. But the other piece of that was in terms of profession that dealt with aviation, aerospace, and defense. There is no other place like this. This is the place to come. Best decision we ever made as a family, best professional decision I ever made in terms of the ecosystem that supports the individual. But I'd argue today that it's also the ecosystem that supports innovation, that supports aeronautics, that supports the companies and the individuals who are seeking to push those bounds. You don't have to go much further than about 60 miles to the west. You get to Carillon Park, right? And if you've ever been to Carillon Park, I would, you'll find it's a magnificent place. If you haven't, go there. You'll find the Wright Flyer 3, the first practical airplane that encompasses all the technologies used on modern aircraft. And that set the stage for innovation of Ohio. John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, the Wright Brothers, Eugene Kettering, the Kettering Bug, the first unmanned aeronautical vehicle, right? The aerial torpedo. Incredible technology for the time, pushing the state of the art. And it hasn't stopped there. To give you the bottom line, ultimately, is just as a previous generation of Ohioans led the nation into the air age of the early 20th century, and another generation led this nation into the space age of the latter 20th century, so will a new generation of Ohioans and Ohio lead this nation to an aerospace age of the 21st. We're truly on the cusp of that 21st century. What I thought I'd do also is give you a little idea, a little snapshot of the public policy of Ohio, the governor's strategy towards aerospace and defense, very briefly. And that is the four pillars that I think really encompass the Ohio aerospace and defense ecosystem, that are very important to set the stage and the bounds in which this type of technology can not only grow but thrive in its development. The first of those is Ohio's federal installations. And really there are a couple of gems in that, but the first and foremost, we all talk about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, $16 billion of economic impact, focused on research, development, acquisition, sustainment, logistics, everything up to and including disposition of aircraft systems. It's incredible. $16 billion of economic impact plus research laboratories. We're sitting actually in Columbus, Ohio, where actually 50% of the United States defense budget goes through. Defense Supply Center, Columbus. That sets the stage for the ecosystem that is Ohio, that's completely bred into that. Fourth largest National Guard, second largest Air National Guard. It's pretty huge, and reserve, and also federal installation, NASA Glenn. Second pillar is Ohio's research and development ecosystem, led by its national level laboratories. Both NASA Glenn Lewis site, Plumbrook site, of course, where Orion is right now, doing its final testing, leaving probably in mid-March after successful completion of that program, but also the Air Force Research Lab and its 4 directorates, and Battelle, right, underpinned by the Ohio Federal Research Network. I think you saw their slides out front. And the university research institutes, both public and private. The third pillar, right, is the industry of Ohio's aerospace and defense world, right? And you heard George mention #1 supplier to Boeing, #1 supplier to Airbus of the 50 states. Prime, both GE Aviation and General Dynamics Land Systems, Boeing navigation systems in Newark, right? Fascinating, as well as a mid-level of supply chain that is incredibly strong to include the Meggetts of the world and a variety of different companies, to include Hartzell, Parker, so Alcoa, right? So the industrial infrastructure is critical. The last pillar is the workforce. So pillar number 4, the workforce, right? Because none of this matters if you don't have the people that can enable this, right? And that's both university educated and Dr. Newton and Ohio State represent what a gem of aerospace work that goes on here. And the idea that I can integrate this into an ecosystem, right? They can integrate this into a multidiscipline process. That's incredible. As well as career tech center trained, right? Welders, machinists who actually make this, make it work. And there's a third dimension that we often forget, and that's the government workers who want to retire and looking for a second 20-year career in the aerospace and defense industry. When you have 30,000 people, right, Pat, 10,000 people at Defense Supply Center Columbus, 8,000 people at NASA, that is a resource that doesn't exist anywhere else in the nation. The size of that resource and of experienced, cleared folks who are ready to engage again for another 20-year career. That's power. It flows into a strategy that the governor's promulgated. The first is knowledge, right? Everywhere I go, and I put 45,000 miles on the car since I've been driving around Ohio. I'm not a newbie to the aerospace and defense industry in Ohio, but everywhere I go, it's, I didn't know you did that here. What does that equate to? It equates to lost opportunity. That's exactly what you're fighting right here, right? You will defeat the lost opportunities by virtue of understanding and discussing the topics you're going to be discussing today, right? And I find that after seeing one site, 2 weeks later I'll see another site. Are you guys talking about? And you put them together, and the serendipitous is incredibly powerful. But the challenge now is for me, for Ohio, to move from serendipity to strategic. And that's what we're doing. And that's what we're doing. Once understanding Ohio's capabilities, then expound that to the rest of the world. Number 2 in the strategy, right, is to aggressively seek mission, industry, and jobs with Jobs Ohio. Make use of what we are doing. And there's a threefold value proposition that has served Ohio incredibly well since the beginning of aviation, right? And that value proposition is proximity. It's not in any one of those sites or those piece parts of the ecosystem, each one of them being critically important and huge and valuable in and of themselves, but it is the proximity of all of those, right? It's the proximity of research and development to acquisition to manufacturing. all superimposed on a number one supply chain. If you can do that, then all of a sudden, the rest become very, very easy. As an acquisition officer, I was gone 2 weeks out every month to my prime on the coast, right? And of the remaining 2 weeks, my prime was gone to the sub one. So how much work did we get done every month? Probably about that. And if you can leverage proximity of capabilities, then all of a sudden you got a disruptive value proposition that the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force, Dr. Roper, has been looking for. And in this area, about a week ago, Dr. Roper goes, urban air mobility, urban transport, that's exactly what he wants to see so we can understand how to take in and governmentalize, not commercialize, governmentalize commercially derived technologies. That's the way to a disruptive acquisition paradigm that the Air Force in particular has been looking for. What better way to do that than in proximity to research, development, acquisition? I read very much with interest 2 days ago in Aviation Week that the Air Force is launching its own efforts to speed up the commercial eVTOL market. And I kind of read that as 90% of the space you're talking about right today, right? Both in terms of cargo, but also in terms of people. And how do we speed this up? How do we incentivize helping you to work faster so then we can make use of that technology both in a commercial as well as a government sense, right? As well as a military sense. The opportunities are boundless. They are boundless and they are based on the legacy, traditions, and capabilities that are and historically have been Ohio. So, as you talk today, as you go through these critical topics, number one, please know that the governor sends his greetings and his appreciation, as do I, for what you do, right? For the vision, for the foresight that you provide to really the new frontier of aeronautics. And that frontier exists in so many different parameters, whether it's technology, whether it's urban planning, whether it's law, whether it's regulatory, right? It's incredible, the opportunities. So thank you for what you do, because you take risk. You take that technology risk. You take regulatory risk. You push the state of the art. You take conceptual risk. And that is what really leads us into the next generation. So thank you on behalf of the governor of the state of Ohio for this. We wish you all the best. If we can be of service in any way, that's why I exist. As a member of the governor's cabinet, he said, you're here to support. I am here to support. So please let me know in any way that Ohio can assist in the development of this area. Are there any questions I can answer? Great, thank you. I'll be around for the morning, so please let me know. Thank you.